This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on a church. We get on. Welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. Garrigus, a busy man. He's in studio, man.
I've been running around, but I wanted to see you because I'm going out of town maybe tonight. So I figured the only way I would see you before then, ever since you became kind of a West Side guy, I don't see you as much.
You know? Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here in the flesh.
Glad.
Always a better show, sonically and spiritually.
I agree. And there's so much to talk about. Should we at least start with Ukraine, since that seems to be the subject du jour? I mentioned last week, I think it was last week, we talked about, or at least I talked about, the Azerbaijan alignment that's starting, or that Russia did the day before the invasion, and kind of this alignment with Turkey. And one of the things that occurred, and then that was written about. Last night I was reading an article, I think in Politico, and somebody who was I think it was an interview with Fiona Hill. They were talking. She was doing the analysis because she's a Russian file. And one of the things that occurs to me, and I hope it doesn't pan out, but I remember when the kind of Azerbaijani invasion of Armenia was happening. In the first, 30 days maybe, I mean, it was the gritty Armenians. They're there. They're defending. We were kind of in our community. It wasn't getting worldwide attention, but we were here in the diaspora. We were very kind of, if you take what's happening in the world with Ukraine right now and you just take it as a microcosm 2 years ago, we felt the same way. We were going to hold out. And then it ended up being, a disaster. And this euphoria that I've seen in the people, the outpouring of support for the Ukrainians and everything. And, I'm not knocking it at all. In fact, it's, I understand it. But I think people underestimate the mismatch here. And I just would caution a little bit of kind of damp down a little bit of this, this thing's going to end or whatever else. I think people underestimate just how, and I used the word last time we talked, diabolical Putin is. And
well, some of it has to also, there has to be a lot of factors, which is Russia rolls into Afghanistan and they have this long protracted battle, and the Afghani army eventually drives them out, but they're fighting in the hills, and it's all chronicled in Rambo 3 or something, or maybe it was Rambo 2. I can't remember, but Stallone chronicled it. But the point is this. If you have a culture where, it's not a lot of air conditioning and a lot of HBO Max and Teslas and shit like that, then it's easy to hang out in the hills for 10 years and fight because you're not really going home to the culture. You're not missing the culture. It's sort of like a lot of people feel that way about prison. You're staying in some flop house in L.A. or you go to prison. It's almost a lateral move, When some of your clients got to go in the joint, that's a fast free fall from a long, hard climb, right?
By the way, there's guys who have developed a niche for how to prepare people like that for going to prison, right?
And they'll come out sober and down 30 pounds, which is always the choice words you give them.
Right. I've told you, by the way, some guys who get a year and a day, I say, this is the best thing that's ever going to happen to you. And I got one guy I'm thinking of in particular.
If you're from a place that's metropolitan and they got an Apple store and you're used to going out for dinner and a movie, it would strike me that you wouldn't spend 10 years fighting in the hills.
They've been very creative. I heard today, I don't know if it's true, but I thought it was clever, that the Ukrainians are doing stuff like changing the signs and having the signs directed in different directions, or having the digital signs say basically "fuck you, Russia," and
right.
they're that's become kind of their mantra is "fuck off, Russian," whether it's to the warship or the caravan. And
if Russia ever invades L.A., we're going to have signs that say "click it" or "ticket."
Ticket.
That'll be all we can muster as far as the resistance goes.
Yeah, right. I can you imagine?
Buzz driving is drunk driving.
I'm sure you would see Garcetti or Newsom in their flat jackets down in the, saying, no ride for me. I just need more ammo.
Listen, they would be like the mayor of the town from Red Dawn. They would immediately partner up with the invading force saying, hey, can't we strike a deal, fellas? Remember, I got... my grandparents are from Russia. Yeah. So I don't have a strong head on it because I don't feel like anybody does. I feel sometimes I'm hearing these are old Soviet tanks and the Ukrainians are making short work of them. The others, there's a 40-mile-long invasion caravan. What the hell are we going to do? Should there be a no-fly zone? If there is a no-fly zone, that's going to provoke the Russians as soon as we shoot down a MiG. It's all over the road. It's
everywhere. And by the way, it's very difficult to discern what is misinformation, disinformation coming from, from Russia or anybody else. I mean, yesterday I was reading that that Putin has planted his family and his 36-year-old in a underground nuclear bunker that doubles as a underground city that Gazprom had constructed, and that's where they're hanging out. And he's now gone to the nuclear deterrent. And then you've got whether or not Ukraine will ever. I think the one thing you could probably say is that he miscalculated the Ukrainians. I think that seems to be the case because based on what I've seen so far, what you've seen so far, I don't think you would have sent in the kind of stuff he sent in if he thought he was. I mean, I think he got some kind of intelligence that he was going to be a conquering hero. And that was clearly not a good piece of intelligence, at least so far as to what's being reported. But at the same time, if you listen to the reporters, and that's always dangerous, but who are reporting out of Russia, he's still got 60 to 70% approval rating, and they may not be getting accurate information. They're the Russians themselves. So there's so many things going on, and then you follow some of these websites that 1 minute are saying somebody was captured, the next minute they were slaughtered, and now they're POWs. And so it's very difficult to get any kind of accurate or to be confident about the information you're getting.
It is, though, speaking of the news outlets, I was talking to Dr. Drew earlier today in New Orleans, and I said, though, it is kind of refreshing to switch over to CNN and just see some reporting on a battle.
I haven't watched a concerted time of CNN in God knows how long. And it is refreshing. I mean, in fact, there's almost a contrast to MSNBC at this point, which is kind of shocking.
Well, MSNBC is talking about subversive narratives supplied by Trump or Tucker Carlson, who are cheering on Vladimir Putin, and then getting into this, maybe they shouldn't be able to say these things, or there's always, never let a catastrophe go to waste. There could be something. We might see if we can get Tucker kicked off Twitter during this whole Ukrainian shit show. And at the same time, but what current stories are you looking at?
Well,
that
Gary's
are in the
Gary's got a couple of them. First, though, let me talk about Truebill. Can I talk about Truebill? Mm-hmm. Wonder why free trials renew without your consent. This is one of the most irritating things. I can't believe the amount of time I've spent on this. It's a scam. Don't let corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. This is so ingenious. It's an app, Truebill is, that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions that not only you don't need, want, or you just forgot about because you don't want it. On average, people save, get this, up to $720 a year. Truebill has helped 2 million plus users save over $100 million. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. I'm doing that, I swear. I'm doing it tonight when I leave here because I've got so many subscriptions. I mean, if you were to add up how much I pay in subscriptions, because I love the Apple News and the other things, but then I keep getting billed endlessly for stuff I've never even opened up. Right, Gary?
That's right. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/doubt. Go right now, truebill.com/DOUBT. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/doubt.
So, Gary, there was one interesting thing, and I think it was Brett had written about it, and it had to do, maybe you can give it some context, with the FBI forensics lab. And you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the so-called, is it Agar memo?
Yeah. Do you know about this? Have you heard about this? Gary can summarize it. It's fascinating. There's a memo that is out. Gary will summarize it.
Yeah, Jim Agar, who's an assistant general counsel for the FBI, has issued a memo doubling down on so-called science. And what he's basically instructing prosecutors and expert witnesses to do is to work together to undermine any attempt the court or defense lawyers may make to depict these findings as questionable. It starts by implying that courts are wrong to even question the expertise of forensic techs.
Isn't that just stunning that a guy who is general counsel for the FBI is actually, I wonder what he thought when he was writing this. Like this is a good idea. I'm going to start questioning. We're going to double down on the idea, like firearm identification. You know, you grow up before you're a lawyer. You think fingerprints. You know, it's everyone's unique. It's like snowflakes. Blah blah blah. Then you start to get into it, or you cross-examine one of these so-called experts, and you realize it's not a science. It's more of an art. The firearm identifications. 20 years ago, I tried a case and we just started asking questions of this so-called firearms expert. And it was stunning to me how much of it was just complete bullshit. I mean, the striations and the and this and that, and the guy's looking at it. And then you just start asking questions. Well, okay, take a picture of what it was you were looking under the microscope. Show me what it is. And it was stunning just how much bullshit it really is. And this guy is push back on it. Don't allow it in. I mean, I remember I had a case, I think I told you this once, and it's a similar example. In California, for instance, if you want to introduce a new line of scientific evidence, so to speak, you have to do a hearing. There's a hearing that has to be done, or there has to be a court of appeals case that kind of blesses this area. And so we started doing a mitochondrial DNA. Had never been introduced. And you start asking questions, and it started to fall apart. And I'll never forget the DOJ witness started testifying, DOJ California witness, okay, because that's baby DOJ. And they couldn't answer questions. So the prosecutor started to panic because this is one of their linchpins, was this mitochondrial DNA, which basically goes through the maternal line. Well, they flew somebody in from the FBI and then in the crime lab, and started asking them simple questions. And it fell apart even more. They were basing this whole thing. You know, you always hear those numbers. Oh, it's 1 in a trillion. What are you basing that off of? And it turns out they were basing it off of a database of 5,000 people that was skewed. And it was like, well, statistically, you'd never get away with that. I mean, you could be a freshman at UCLA taking a statistics course, and they would tell you that's flawed.
You know, experts. It's so funny. I sent a tweet out last night because somebody tweeted me this article that said, you know, Hunter Biden's in more trouble than we think. And I just wrote back, hey, this is fake news because 50 former FBI and CIA agents all signed a piece of paper saying it was fake Russian news, and they're experts.
Yeah. Well, let me just tell you about the experts. You don't see it everywhere, but I will tell you one of the things you do if you've got a client who's under investigation, and one of the things that reporters do is they'll hang out outside of where the grand jury is, and they'll see who's going in and out. Well, some of the people that they've reported going in and out of the grand jury, if you believe it's accurate that they're going into the grand jury, are concerning. And concerning. If I was representing a client, I'd be telling the client, we need to get in there, we need to do something. Presumably they are. We need to be talking to the prosecutors.
So what is this guy suggesting? That they rely on or don't rely on experts?
No, he's suggesting the other. If they start to question your expertise, double down, push back. Don't let them do it. I mean, How is that a search for the truth?
Didn't we just go through COVID where none of the experts were experts?
Exactly.
I mean, imagine if you were trying COVID.
Right. If COVID was the U.S. versus COVID or people versus COVID.
So
right?
we get the head of the CDC, we get Fauci, we get the head of the WHO, and we put them on.
Barbara Ferrer.
Right? She Rochelle Walensky.
Yeah.
They would come up there. And what would they have to say a year ago about COVID? And by the way, their collective expertise, it's nothing but degrees hanging in the office. And this guy headed up the lab that worked on infectious disease. I mean, the credentials are super impressive, right? And then we'd put them all up, and some would be wrong just because they were wrong. Others would be wrong, but they'd be motivated, like, oh, this thing couldn't have come from the lab because of, and then they would confuse you with why it could have never been created in a lab in Wuhan. And if it was the people versus COVID, that would be the foremost experts. They would all be credentialed, and they would mostly be wrong.
Well, and I've often talked with you and Gary about ad hominem attacks. And in logic, an ad hominem attack is, instead of dealing with the argument, you just attack the man. You say, oh, Garrigus is a defense lawyer. He's a scum, so I'm not going to deal with his argument or something like that. Well, when you do the credential thing, there's almost a logical fallacy there. Because it's like, oh, I'm not going to engage in what you say. I'm going to just give you a pass because of your credentials, and that's kind of what you're talking about. It's what I would call a reverse 404 or something like that. But interestingly, I think when you were just talking about the lab leak theory, there was something I believe it was in NPR within the last couple of days that was basically saying, yeah, we've dispensed with the lab leak theory.
Yes.
Right? You saw that,
I
right?
heard Alex Berenson talk about that.
Yeah.
That's a guy who's not a credentialed expert, but he's a reporter. He's tenacious. He gets all the data from Israel and Sweden and elsewhere. He crunches it, and then he reports it. And they're like, it couldn't have come from the lab because so much of it was in the wet market.
Right.
But that's where viruses are spread.
Well,
I mean, it's like saying it couldn't have come from the lab. Everyone on the cruise ship got it. It must have emanated from the cruise ship. And it's like, no, that's where everyone was in tight quarters with not a lot of cleanliness.
Well, I saw something. Somebody tweeted at me. We may have talked about it, but it never hurts to play it again. I believe it wasn't Newbar, who's the founder of Moderna, but it was the CEO of Moderna being questioned, and he was on the wrong network. The wrong network meaning it was Maria Bartiromo, and right,
on Fox.
On Fox. So you can automatically dismiss that because it's Fox,
right?
So that's to be dismissed. But she asked a couple of questions, and the questions, if you watch it, maybe somebody spliced it. Maybe it was, taken out of context. It sure didn't look that way. Maybe Gary will find it. But he didn't have an answer for the sequencing that had apparently predated the virus being spread. And if you had the sequencing done prior to the virus being spread, that's kind of an interesting question for somebody to answer, isn't it?
I know it came from the lab because of how hard they fought to get me to think it didn't come from the lab, which is
that's your logical approach.
My new ethos in life is I'm a cop going, hey, pop the trunk. Let me see what's in the trunk. Why? There's nothing in the trunk. You got no business in there. Well, if all you got is a fucking scissor jack and a save a spare out there, then you pop the trunk and you get on your way. But now you're yelling at me, why do you want to look in the trunk? And now I think there's something in the trunk. You guys were so resolute. You were deplatforming people. You knew unequivocally something that's unknowable, but you knew it anyway. Now I'm suspicious. And I feel, look, what if when I was screaming about natural immunity, we would have had Fauci on the People versus COVID, and he would have told us all about we don't know about natural immunity, we don't think it's as effective. We would ask him about the vaccines. He would say, you can't get it, you can't spread it, there's no breakthrough cases. I mean, their story would have been the experts with 700 years of collective expertise in this field would have been all over the road. When I yelled at the guy who interviewed me from the TV show The Doctors, when I was saying to him, you shut the beaches down? He said, well, we didn't know. We didn't know back then. I said, you didn't know? You shut the beaches down? We didn't know. I said, well, then what do we need you for? Why? And by the way, if you don't know, then why are we listening to you? Or, by the way, if you don't know, then leave the fucking beaches open if you don't know.
Which comes back full circle to this memo. It's the Agar, correct, Gary? Yeah. So why would you, if you were a criminal justice professional who's devoted to seeking the truth, right? Mm-hmm. Why would you just orchestrate or put down on paper a plan to basically push back and, in essence, deceive? Because isn't that what it is? It's basically a license to deceive. So it's just mind-boggling to me. My daughter is trying a case in New York with Mark Agnifilo. And in this case, it's the Roger Ng trial. And Roger was I believe, employed by Goldman, and he's being tried. And as federal prosecutions go, they gave immunity to, my father's line was, they give immunity to the bank robber to get the getaway driver. So they've got this guy, Leisner, I think is his name. And Leisner is there testifying about this, that, and the other thing. And during the trial itself, while he's on the stand and the prosecutor's still asking questions on direct, all of a sudden there's a document dump, and I'm taking all of this from publicly filed documents, and the government themselves admits it's inexcusable that they haven't turned over documents which are exculpatory, meaning showing his the Rogers' innocence. And it's stunning to me how often that happens and what a pattern this is. And I understand it's humans and they're trying cases, but you would think, if the old adage is true that you would rather 9 guilty go free rather than convict 1 innocent, which is what our system is based on, then why hold down, whether it's the Agar memo saying I'm going to double down on getting shitty science in. Remember, you and I have talked about this years ago about a lot of that arson science was complete nonsense. I mean, they just made the shit up, and now they've had to do things about it, reverse convictions and things like that. There's many examples of that. Why would you do that? Why you had the Men in Black thing that erases your memory. You don't understand that, it's kind of your Duke Lacrosse case thing. Why would you want to convict somebody if there is a reasonable doubt?
Well, in some cases you want to get elected or reelected in high profile stuff. It's also kind of a weird thing, which is you start down a road, has nothing to do with the court. And we got Maria Bartolomo's thing
let's just take a look at this for 1 second while we're thinking about it.
I will tell you this. I got into an argument with a friend of mine once.
Yeah.
And I said, it's like that old F1, 6-wheeled F1 car from Elf. Elf was the livery, European gas company. Navy blue with like a yellow Elf. Maybe Jackie Stewart drove
it. Wasn't the
remember.
TV show Alf.
No, it was Elf, not Alf. And he said, no, that 6-wheel car, that's a John Player special, the gold and black one. I said, no, that's a Lola car, and that's Mario Andretti's car, and the 6-wheel car, the one had 2 front wheels in it. Do you remember that car?
I do.
And that was Elf.
There was a poster of it that was kind of iconic.
And then the John Player special was a real cigarette company, I think, was a big car of that era, mid-late 70s.
Wow,
and then
I'd forgotten that till you mentioned
it. He said, oh, no, that's a John Player special. So we found a computer. This was a while ago. We were traveling or something, and he would type in 6-wheel, F1 car, and the Elf car would pop up every time, and then he'd put John Player Special, six-wheel F1 car, and the Elf car would keep popping up. And he'd put John Player Special, and the 4-wheel Lola car would pop up, and he would just keep doing it. And at a certain point, I said to him, "All right, are we satisfied here? Because I've won this argument." And he went, "It ain't over." And I was like, "It's over for me." Well, it's not over for him. And that's kind of the new world order, whether you're Mike Nifung with Duke Lacrosse, like, "Hey, we found a receipt, ATM, 12:07 in the evening. He said she was being raped. She was 40 miles away at 12. How could he be there?" It ain't over. Yes, it is. Sometimes you have to go, it's over.
It's over. Just stick a fork in it. I don't get it. It's just mind-boggling.
We have the audio of that. Gary had all the official particulars.
Yeah, the Maria Bartiromo clip. I've got it up, and it'll be in the video if you're watching this on YouTube.
You had all the names and everything is what I'm saying. I'm missing them now.
We'll put them back up. Here you go.
Stefan Bancel, I guess.
Moderna, right?
Yeah, correct. He's the Moderna CEO. Here we go.
I've got to end on this story that has been circulating. No doubt you saw it, about the origins of COVID. We've all been trying to understand how this started and whether or not this did come from a lab in Wuhan. Let me ask you what the Daily Mail is reporting. It says more evidence COVID was tinkered with in a lab. Now scientists find the virus contains a tiny chunk of DNA that matches sequence patented by Moderna 3 years before the pandemic began. Your reaction, Stefan. What can you tell us?
So my scientists are looking into those data to see how accurate they are or not. As I've said before, the hypothesis of an escape from a lab by an accident is possible. Human makes mistakes. So is it possible that the Wuhan lab in China was working on viruses enhancement or gene modification? And then there was an accident where somebody was infected in the lab and then infected their families and friends. It is possible. On the claim you just mentioned, the scientists are analyzing to know if it's real or not.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Does she do a follow-up?
Yeah, there's 30 more seconds. You want to
Sorry,
try it out?
no,
it's okay. Here we go.
Okay.
Struck by the line, it matched a genetic sequence patented by Moderna for cancer research purposes, Stefan.
It's like, I got to go CNN.
Yeah, and that's the type of things that the team is looking at very carefully to know is it real or not.
Okay.
So it takes a bit of time to analyze all the genetic sequence.
Well, Stefan, again, really important work that you and your scientists are doing. We thank you so much for walking us through it this morning. Thanks so much, Stefan Bancel.
I'm going to file this under Fauci, not knowing about how durable natural immunity. Well, we haven't looked into that. Well, who's looking into this of all the people on the planet?
It's kind of an interesting question since we do a legal show. If you've patented the sequence, I think I would call my general counsel first. I'd say, you got a patent. I know, I'm not a member of the patent bar, but I've watched people who get patents, and I've been around it for a number of years. There's a process to getting a patent. Where did you get this from? What was the sequence? Where did that come from? Who attested? I might want to call my general counsel and ask some questions there, not just my scientist. I think I'd want to know, first of all, from general counsel or our outside IP counsel, what the hell?
Is there going to be lawsuits going down?
They've given immunity. There's a general immunity. I did read an analysis that was very well done the other day about potential problems that both Pfizer and Moderna may face at some point if they can prove that there was manipulation of the adverse events. And you know what happens if you get a critical mass of plaintiffs' lawyers or class action lawyers or lawyers who were inventive at some point, that immunity set aside, not natural immunity, but legal immunity. There are ways to get around that. And if some of this stuff, and who knows? I mean, I haven't done a deep dive into it, but if some of this stuff is true and that there was manipulation, and I say if because that's speculation, I can see a world in which there could be a free fall here.
Supreme Court.
Yeah.
We were going to talk about that last week, but we didn't get around to it. What do you, I'll tell you what, I'll set the table for that. First, I'll tell you about the ladders. We're experiencing the biggest change in society and workplace since World War II. Recruiters, I should say, don't underestimate the growth in the job market this year. Make it your best year ever with ladders. It's where smart recruiters and hiring managers find superior, expertly screened candidates to fill 100K to 500K positions on average. Ladder job seekers have 15 years experience, and most have a bachelor's or even a master's degree. Ladders saves you time with tap to call. One-click contact, unlimited resume downloads, and advanced features that separate active, ready-to-hire candidates from those just shopping around. It is Ladders, right, Gary?
That's right. Save time and effort. Step up your search to the Ladders and target professionals that meet your specs for the first time. Visit theladders.com/podcast. That's theladders.com/podcast.
Before we get to the Supreme Court, there was a lot of pushback. Last week we had Karen Agnifilo, who used to be Cy Vance's number 2, and she said that the Trump case was not political. Or she didn't view it as political. And then there was a lot of pushback on that online. Let me address that for a second. To the extent that any elected prosecutor picks a case or chooses a case, if you're elected, you're always thinking about politics. So that's kind of silly because they are an elected prosecutor. Now, then the question was, what I saw was chatter about these 2 resignations on the same day. Mm-hmm. Well, remember that at least one, maybe both, but for sure one, was hired from the outside to come to the inside the DA's office. So if he resigned, there is always the distinct possibility, and I don't have the information, but it would strike me as he was led to believe he was going to have a free rein. He didn't get a free rein, or there was the new DA said, I'm not going to do this anymore, which, by the way, is also a political calculation in the truest sense of the word, because he's an elected official, as we talked about, and he's making a decision that will affect his political future. Whether you like it or not, that's exactly what happens. So I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on that.
Well, my bigger picture, my sort of bigger concern is this era that we're sort of moving toward, which is sort of scary. We've heard a lot of stories about the FBI and the CIA. Heard a lot of, you were talking about prosecutors, withholding evidence and things like that. And it strikes me that our system is kind of running a popularity contest. There's many things, it's like when you get to a certain point financially, there's things we can look into as far as your taxes, and you're calling this a write-off, and you've incorporated this, and half of it is bullshit, because when you're in a certain bracket, you just engage in certain behaviors. You got your car. Oh, it's registered out of Montana. What the hell's going on there, right? And so it's all there, and everyone engages in the same thing. And when you take a look at a guy like Trump, he's in it up to his neck. But look no further than Biden and his son going to Ukraine on Air Force Two and cutting deals with Chinese energy companies and shit. Like they're both are doing it. Fine. My world is either don't look into either one of them or look into both of them. The scary part about the time we're in is I feel like Trump is just as a target on his back, and they're going to look into everything all the time, and they're always going to find that shit the same way they'd go, you don't live in Montana? You have 8 cars registered in Montana? When's the last time you've been to Montana? And then it would be, holy shit. The ladies from The View would go, could you imagine? That's everywhere all the time. It almost comes with the territory. I mean, not if you're Al Franken, let's say. He's got his own set of problems that weren't really crimes. But the point is it's there. The scary part is that we're deciding to do like a sort of weaponize the IRS. Like, what if you just said that? What if you said, look, you got a company, I got a company. Yeah, but the IRS doesn't like these types of companies. So then I go into a magnifying glass, and of course they're going to find shit like they would with any company, except they're not looking into that company because they don't have a beef with that company. I don't like the government working that way.
Well, this is a first cousin of the argument about a special counsel or an independent counsel, give me the man, I'll find the crime. Or the former Ninth Circuit Judge Kaczynski, he used to say every adult walking around has committed 3 federal felonies if you look hard enough. And I'm paraphrasing. And that goes back to the political component.
Yeah, and I also don't like the side to turn it to Cuomo, for instance, and I've said this a million times, now the 13th woman has come out and ended her silence about him patting her on the ass on the elevator. It's like, so it's like the cops going, that's the 13th time he rolled through a 4-way stop sign. It's like, okay, it's still not vehicular manslaughter. Yeah, but he just rolled through a 15th one. Like, okay, that's not evidence.
Well, the one, I saw this the other day, and it was, did you see the accusation against Jerry Lewis? No, the last time I saw, he's dead.
Yes.
Okay. What is the, is there a reason that we're now talking sexual assault about Jerry Lewis?
Well, he gave a really shitty interview at the end of his life, and he went from beloved to cranky old fuck, and then we got angry.
There's an interview, we've talked about this, we may have even played it, Gary may be able to find it. We've talked about this. I use this at seminars, that this is how to give a deposition. I have shown that. I can't tell you how many clients I've shown it to, how many new lawyers I've shown it to. I've said, this is how you conduct yourself in a deposition. Can you picture that?
Oh, a complete economy of words.
And Gary's gonna,
I can play you guys a minute of it if you'd like.
Yeah. 45 seconds, because it's worth just, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's worth watching the whole thing, because it's as educational. And by the way, I've done this in front of a convention center room full of trial lawyers, and I've never had any pushback that, yes, this is the best learning you'd ever
template.
Want. Yep.
Isn't going well at all.
That has some VO on it. Sorry about that. Let me find a cleaner one.
All right. Do you want to talk Supreme Court?
Yeah, I do. So, there's been, I think, a whole lot of talk about this appointment, but
Brown Jackson, I can't remember her first name.
Katanja
something.
Yeah,
but it's Brown Jackson, I think.
Right, and under any measure, she's as qualified as anybody that I can remember when you look at her pedigree, where she went, the fact that she clerked for Breyer, that she's got Ketanji, yeah, and that I would call her justice or judge, that she's got a series of opinions that she's written, that she's produced. So you compare her to, I would consider her, I talk all the time about Neil Gorsuch, and you may disagree vehemently, and I do on a number of issues with him, but you can't say that he's not qualified for the U.S. Supreme Court. It's the same thing here. And by the way, there's been a number, for those of you on the right, there's been a number of Republican lawyers who have come out, not the least of which was William Burke, who's the co-managing partner of a large law firm, and said, and I believe he clerked with her, and said that it's beyond reproach in terms of questioning her credentials.
I don't think there's been much pushback. I think what happened, most news I've watched assumes that she'll sail through. That's at least what I've heard. But I think the problem, and this is kind of an overarching problem, is Biden announced beforehand he's going to put the first African-American woman on the Supreme Court, and then found a qualified African-American woman to put on the Supreme Court, and then everyone raised an eyebrow. He just should have never said that. He should have just went, look, check the record. Here's who I'm nominating, and she's overqualified or
for
very
a guy
qualified.
who's been a politician for how many years? 40? 45?
What's it feel like, or how long's he actually been?
He knew what he was doing. He was cashing. He was payback or cashing a check. He was doing it.
You have Jerry Lewis in our last minutes here.
Give me 30 more seconds.
Okay.
All right. Well,
so I was hoping for the Supreme Court Justice Kruger here in California, but this, to my mind, is an unassailable choice.
In a world where everyone's hair is on fire on the right or on the left for Supreme Court nominations, and maybe it's the Ukrainian war, but I haven't heard much. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of pushback.
I think it started, and then Ukraine came along. I mean, have you ever seen kind of a wellspring that Ukraine has produced? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. We have 35 seconds of Jerry Lewis on how to conduct yourself during a deposition.
Have you ever thought about retiring?
Why?
Was there never a moment that you thought it might be time to retire, or you would want?
Why?
Bob Hope, George Burns, Sinatra. Do you see similarities with them?
None.
None? You're on tour now. What else do you have planned? Or do you have anything else lined?
Yeah, but nothing we want to talk about.
Do you have a favorite story about, like, Dean or Frank Sinatra or somebody that you worked with that you'd like to share?
No.
Not at all?
None.
How about, do you have an unfavorite story you'd like?
Nope. Not for this.
There is, for all of you young lawyers or old lawyers like me, there's no better prep for a witness than that.
No, look, it's interesting. I use a lot of examples and metaphors and analogies, and people always love them because when it's Jerry Lewis, he's sitting in his office in Beverly Hills, has nothing to do with a deposition. But if you hit the analogy just right, it's perfect. And it's a better and more absorbable teaching moment than just saying, don't say this and don't say that.
I don't know how many times before I ever saw that Jerry Lewis interview, my expression was, look, you answer the questions. Yes, no, I don't know.
Right.
Okay, I could say that 50 times. I'll put the witness on the stand, and then they just vomit out words.
Right.
I mean, no matter how many times I've said it, I show that,
right.
And it crystallizes.
Yeah, but so now that's his legacy.
Yeah.
All right, he's a tool. Mark, I know you got to run because you're running back to court or into.
I appreciate it. We've got an important new case which I can't talk about yet, but we'll talk about on Thursday.
I am interested because I do know some about it, and I cannot wait for that. All right, you'll be excused.
Thank you.
I will tell you about
Bye, Mark.
Geico. Would you love to save some money on your insurance? Of course you would. And who doesn't love a deal when it comes to great rates, insurance, and everything? Geico can help. Insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, RV, even homeowners and condo insurance and renters coverage. Save even more with a special discount when you bundle coverages. Plus, it's easy. You can use the Geico mobile app and 24-hour roadside assistance, and you can switch to Geico. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Switch today and save at geico.com. All right, March 10th, Waukegan, Illinois, Genesee Theater. That'll be me doing stand-up. And then we're doing live pods and more stand-up. That'll be at the Comedy Club in Kansas City, or of Kansas City. That'll be March 11th and 12th. You go to AdamCarolla.com for all the live shows. And until next time, this is Adam Carolla for Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.